Grimaldi picked the vehicle up at around Gillette and Fowler Avenue. He stayed behind the vehicle. At some point in time, the vehicle realized that law enforcement was behind him. By that time, Sheriff's Office, Tampa police cars were in behind him. They made an attempt to stop him about a mile north of here around Harney Road as he had came down Temple Terrace Highway and Harney Road towards 301. He started firing shots back about a mile north of here. He was firing through his rear windshield and some out the driver's door. That pursuit continued until they reached this point here. The suspect lost control of his vehicle. He got into the northbound lanes of traffic. He was traveling southbound, but he got in the northbound lanes. He lost control and he spun across the road and continued to fire on the officers. At that time, there was Tampa police officers and sheriff's deputies, also 2 officers from that are police officers, but on the U.S. Marshals Task Force that were there, and there was a large amount of gunfire that was exchanged between the suspect and the law enforcement officers that were on the scene. The law enforcement officers had a ballistic shield that they had up in their car, and at that time the suspect continued to fire. We were firing on him, and he was, as a result of that, he was taken into custody. He was he was transported from the scene, and he died at about 1:21 while receiving medical care. And that's kind of what's happening. And Chief Ryle, take any questions.
At this time, can you verify for us if any officers, anybody was injured other than him?
Right now, we have no officers injured, but we do have their cars have been hit. That we have, some of the pillars of their cars have have been hit with bullets. I will say one other thing is of interest, and we're going to have the name in a little bit. We're still looking for one female that we recovered her telephone in the event that occurred last night. She is not one of the victims. She is not anybody we know. He did make a statement to one of our victims last night that he had killed someone. We have not found the owner of that last cell phone, and we're trying to run that down right now, but if that doesn't happen pretty quickly, we'll be getting that name out to you and to see if anyone knows her location, to make sure that we don't have another victim out there.
How did we know who he was?
We identified, well, I think Chief had explained that this morning, that he had been identified in an earlier case that occurred back in August in the city of Tampa. This morning he was made on fingerprints from the sexual battery that occurred this morning. We were able to rapidly turn that around and make him on some fingerprints on that one.
Sure. You said you tracked him down in the apartment with the female. Was that his girlfriend, and did he steal the girlfriend's car?
He did hold a gun to her head. Again, the information is sketchy, so I don't really know what their relationship is. They may have known each other at one time, but this morning at one point he did hold a gun to her head. He took her car. He did cut his hair. We had information before he left that he had cut his dreadlocks. We verified that when we went into the apartment, and all that was happening. You can imagine, and the chief can tell you, a lot of stuff happening very quickly. We were finding out that he had taken this car, he had cut his hair and all of those things. He had changed his appearance and everything while all that was going on. So they did the law enforcement officers that were here today did a really, an outstanding job, very quickly identifying this guy, a guy who would have, no doubt in my mind, would have killed somebody before the day was over. There was no doubt in my mind, if he hasn't already.
The most recent female that he took hostage, no sexual assault on her.
I don't know. Have not had a chance really to drill down into that and find out what all happened there. We're getting information over the phone from the guys there, so our information is still a little sketchy on that.
What time did the call come in that this car was where he was probably taking off?
Well, shortly after that briefing, and I've lost a little track of time right now, but I would say it was around, it was shortly before 1 or so, that vehicle was spotted leaving that apartment complex, and there was about a 5-minute gap where we did not have a visual on the vehicle, and that's where the deputy picked the vehicle up. He was eastbound on Fowler. He thought maybe he may be going back to Polk County since he was from Polk County, and he guessed right and picked the vehicle up and just stayed behind him. He didn't activate his lights at the time. He just waited till he got some backup there, and then at some point in time around Harney Road is when he started firing, and there was a shot over the radio of shots fired, and I'm sure we can release that to you pretty quickly.
Sheriff, you know, this is obviously, there's people around here, but this isn't the most populated section of town. Can you tell me what goes through law enforcement's mind, you know, during that kind of pursuit? How do you evaluate how to proceed?
Yeah, it gets tough, and they were talking about that on the radio. You could hear the police officers as they were evaluating where to try to stop him, and there was conversation about that on the radio about where to take him down, and you know, obviously it didn't. We would have liked to be a little further north from here, but you know, he didn't participate in our plan, but eventually did. But the situation is that is something that's going through all of the law enforcement officers' minds, and you know, we had a backdrop here, a hotel, which is a serious situation, but they're trained well and with their directed fire, and I think he did a really good job under the circumstances.
But they obviously didn't want to let him get back out here to I-4.
No, he wasn't. We could not allow it to go any further. I mean, especially the nature of his activities. He was on a tear, and it was clear to everybody, you know, by this morning that this guy, you know, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted very badly to hurt someone, and so he wasn't going to go any further than this.
Can you explain the gunfight that happened right here by the car?
Well, you know, the chief and I were just talking about that, but essentially what happened is the two law enforcement officers that were in the car pulled up behind him. There was already gunfire being exchanged between the bronze car you see beside me and the other maroon car back over here. When they pulled in behind it, they had attempted to ram the car up the road to stop it and didn't stop it. He eventually went out of control, and he started firing through the windshield of the law enforcement vehicle. They had very smartly put up a ballistic shield in the windshield, which was deflecting some of the rounds that were going into the car. So they did a great job with that.
Sheriff, did he mention in any interviews this morning leading you guys to know it was going to come to something like this? Did you guys have any indication outside of just the crime that he was going to try to go out?
We didn't have anything independent. We had not had contact with him. Law enforcement had been looking for him, but you know, based on the nature of how brazen he was, it was, you know, not surprising.
So there was no witness statements or anything leading you guys to know that he was going to try to do this?
Just the fact that he had told someone this morning that he had already killed someone and things of that nature. And yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much.
Witnesses said they heard 1,000 shots. Is that realistic?
Not you know, I don't know how many shots were fired. There were quite a few. I mean, these are high-capacity magazines, and we have at least probably 7 officers altogether between the police department and the sheriff's office that fired. And so, you know, I'd be venturing a guess, but I would say, you know, it could very easily exceed 100.
How many times was he shot? Suspect?
Pardon?
How many times was the suspect shot?
He's hit multiple times, but it's, you know, we have to wait for the medical examiner to tell us that. Anything else, guys?
You know what set this guy off? Have any clue?
No, we don't think we know enough about him. You know, right now we don't know enough about him. But
I mean, he's got a pretty extensive background from what I'm looking at right now, and I know the chief was talking about this earlier, but apparently some very similar crimes in the past couple months. Just one of those things, if you wouldn't have got him, this would have just continued.
we think so. I'll let the chief answer that. The chief was their agency was involved in the earlier investigation.
Yes, these things happen, and I know it, with the sheriff's office and with the police department, we see it quite often, where an individual will accelerate their crimes, both in the numbers and the severity of those. And the indication today was that this wasn't going to end well. And fortunately for the deputies and the officers, they did an outstanding job, outstanding. And none of them being hurt, no innocent citizens, and stopping this individual's rampage.
And speaking to that, can you explain a little bit more about the procedures, this entire chase, and then kind of the maneuvers you all used?
Well, I can tell you one thing that is outstanding for both of our organizations is that, one, we work so well together, but two is the radio system that we have. Every single deputy and officer was on the same radio frequency, and it was a deputy and an officer in pursuit of this vehicle. And they did try, although he had excessive speed, as you can see from the video, they did try to pit that car twice, and then he lost control and ended up where he was at. But he continued to engage in a firefight with these officers, and by the grace of God and outstanding training on the officer's part, they're not injured, and
Is that the same radio
he stopped.
technology you got last August?
Yes, it's exactly what we use the RNC money to purchase and our Homeland Security money to purchase a radio system that both agencies can use. And it's been a benefit from the day we put it in.
I'm sorry, if you could continue with that, Chief, what exactly is that pit procedure? Just for folks that are watching right now, they don't understand.
Well, in essence, they try to hit a vehicle in the rear quarter panel and thus enabling that vehicle from going any further. Clearly, they didn't want it to get up onto the interstate. But, you know, in an instance like this, we have rules and regulations, but in an instance like this, you know, basically all bets are off, because this guy's he's driving somewhere between 80 and 100 miles an hour, shooting out of the car at the pursuing law enforcement. So clearly, all bets are off in that instance, and they understood that they had to end that right there, and that's exactly what they did.
And can you kind of tell me what command officers told the deputies that were pursuing over the radio?
Basically said, "End this," and that's what happened.
One of the officers involved, one of the deputies involved, is the district commander for this area himself. The major that's in charge of this district is one of the officers, or one of the deputy sheriffs who fired. So he was here and he was calling a lot of those shots himself, literally. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.